Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our CARS Reading Skills Workshop as part of the Jack Westin MCAT podcast. As always, you're joined by Molly Kilty and Jack Westin himself. So, in this reading skills workshop, we're going to be talking all about our Jack Westin daily passage from December 10th, called Western Colonization. Now, this passage is a pretty fun one. And I say fun in quotes. Jack, I feel like we were talking about this earlier. It's a little more dense
Yeah.
than some of our other passages that we've read together. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, I think this is pretty hard to read, honestly. I mean, it's not that it's I don't know if it's difficult to read. It's just so mundane and there's a lot going on and you have to be very focused. So I think it's great
Yeah.
practice for someone who might be tired, who might be burned out, and they get a passage like this. Like, how do you stay focused? What do you focus on? And I'm excited to dive in and see.
Yeah. So one of the things for context for anyone listening that's new, that we're going to do is we're going to read this passage sentence by sentence and kind of talk about which sentences carry the most meaning and the most value. Um, it's going to be interesting for this passage because there are actually a lot of ideas here. There's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of ideas at play. So this will be a fun one to track. And again, great practice, especially for those of us that are gearing up for a test date coming, in January or February. Um, so let's go ahead and hop in. Again, if you are listening to this on December 10th, always a good idea to take a quick look at the passage. You can kind of see what your implicit understanding is and then compare it to how we break it down. We'll have the link in the description as well if you're not listening to this on the date it was posted. But let's hop in with our first sentence. So it says Western culture promoted the pursuit of glory. All right. Pretty short sentence. Pretty short, pretty direct. Western culture is promoting the pursuit of glory, right? That I'm trying to simplify it, make it even simpler, but it's pretty short and sweet. Western culture and glory are kind of intertwined.
Right. They're trying to pursue glory. Now, I don't know how they define glory. I don't even know how Western culture is really defined, but that's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It encouraged a warlike disposition. Okay. So this, maybe they're drawing a connection between war and glory, but regardless, we're saying this pursuit of glory encouraged warlike behavior or disposition. So we're kind of combining Western culture, pursuit of glory, and this warlike disposition.
Right. Through war, right? Like it's
Mhm.
encouraging war. I guess that's how you attain glory, right?
Yeah.
So basically, Western culture promoted glory through war, is what I'm getting so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we kind of got that idea in two different sentences. Got like two pieces of the puzzle, but they were separate.
Yeah, yeah, and these are arguments. These are ideas that we need to keep track of because we could argue Western culture promoted glory through another means, right? They could have promoted glory through literature,
Yeah.
through movies, through
Community
um,
service.
community service. Yeah, who knows? And also, the actual first sentence is an argument too. Like, how do we know Western culture is even pursuing glory, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe they're pursuing the opposite of glory, right? Shame, who knows, right? So something that is irrelevant to the argument here. So this is definitely an idea. This is an opinion. We cannot track it for sure precisely. And so we have to just in general, like we don't things that are factual can be tracked, right? We could track actual numbers of who won wars and battles and whatnot, but we can't really track how people view life or what their goals are. That's not going to be easy to track, especially if it's historical. So in this case, this is definitely an argument.
Yeah. And it's not even one person, it's a whole culture. That's even harder to prove. Yeah, you're
Right.
exactly right. Okay. Glory could be achieved through martial valor, through the possession of virtue, in parentheses here, with a meaning closer to virtuoso than to goodness, in parentheses, and through acts performed for the common good. Okay, so we're expanding on glory a little bit, right? There are different ways to achieve glory. They lost me a little bit with the virtuoso, then goodness, but it kind of sounds like we're not saying that glory is inherently good, right? It does say through acts performed for the common good, but it sounds like we're just kind of expanding on glory a little bit. You've already said, or the author has already said very directly, the pursuit of glory encourages or basically promotes war. This is a couple different ways to achieve glory, but I think they've already selected the one that they've introduced, right? It encourages a warlike disposition until they start saying, actually, glory is achieved through the common good only by Western culture. Until they contradict that, I'm thinking they're still pursuing glory through war. So more
That's a good.
context, but not necessarily changing the way that I understand the argument.
It's interesting. Glory could be achieved through all these other means, but you're right. I think they're really focused on the war, right?
Yeah.
Why would they mention all these other things? I mean, I guess it's to seem more reasonable, to seem like,
Hmm.
hey, look, I've thought about this, and I know that glory can be seen in this other way. Okay.
Yeah. I guess we'll just have to find out. Okay. Here is our next sentence, and it's a quote. It looks like we have a pretty long quote here to finish up paragraph one. So it says, the leading men of state must be fed on glory, declared Cicero in De Republica. So we're getting a quote from Cicero, but the men of state must be fed on glory. So we pursued glory, right? In when we say state, I'm assuming we're talking about Western culture, but very clearly relating back to that idea that we're pursuing glory. This sentiment was shared widely amongst Greek and Roman writers. Okay, so again, we're probably associating Greek and Roman writers with the Western culture. Probably. If not, they'll clarify, I'm sure, but that seems fair to conclude so far. And then Richard Eden, one of the earliest promoters of English colonization, declared, quote, Cicero defineth truly glory to be a fame of many and a great desert either toward our citizens, our country, or toward all mankind. If you're not watching the actual video, by the way, this is written in very old English with very unusual spelling, which is why I'm laughing.
Yeah.
But okay, Eden and Cicero, they're both kind of supporting this idea that we achieve glory through war, or, this is something that's promoted by our culture.
Right. It is such a weird sentence.
Yeah.
And I can imagine a test taker reading this and going, what? Why am I
Yeah.
reading non-English here? But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's consistent with what we've been talking about, right? It's
Yeah.
nothing new. We're still talking about glory and how, they must be fed glory. I think pretty much the same material, except it's from a different person. In this case, it's Richard Eden. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that you've said in past podcasts, it's worth tracking names, right? So we've got Cicero and Eden now that are both kind of tied to this idea of Western culture promoting glory, pursuit of glory, and essentially through war.
Yeah.
Um, okay, last sentence here. It says colonization was one means of achieving these aims. Oh, okay. I mean, that feels like in our last sentence we kind of we change our not change our argument, but we add to it a little bit, right? We were just talking about pursuit of glory through war. Now we're saying colonization was how we did this, at least one of the ways that we did this. So we're introducing colonization as a topic. We mentioned it a little bit in the sentence about Eden, but that was so not understandable that I think here it makes a little more sense. So colonization has something to do with this pursuit of glory. Maybe it helps us achieve that glory through war.
Is it safe to say that colonization is the act of war? Is a warlike disposition?
Um, I mean, it's saying it's one means of achieving these aims. The aim is probably the pursuit of glory. It seems likely that it involves this warlike disposition that we talked about, but I don't know that I would make a full-on assumption at that moment that
Right.
it's through war. Glory,
Right.
maybe, but war, I don't think so.
Right, right. I would keep these as separate ideas, right? One is that whole idea of Western culture promoting glory through war. And I would understand that Cicero and Richard Eden, were both kind of brought up as names that support that idea. And then this other argument around how colonization was trying to help, allow for glory. I think that's also an important idea that I would keep track of.
Agreed. All right, let's see if we talk more about colonization here in P2. It is a historical commonplace that early modern colonization was driven by commerce. Okay, so we're now focused more on colonization and commerce than glory and war. So colonization is driven by commerce. Are we
I'm
gonna
still,
come
whenever I think
back?
of colonization, Molly, I think of like glory, right? Like colonization is one way of achieving glory. So is it possible that glory can be driven by commerce since colonization is
I mean, it's
driving?
possible. It's possible, but I mean, I want to wait until the author says it.
Yeah,
Even if it
exactly.
feels that way to me, I want to make sure that, I always like to visualize that when I sit down to read Cars passages, I am a complete blank slate. I'm
Right.
a blank canvas. If they don't tell me, I'm going to be skeptical.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
This is where it's easy to get lost and easy to get confused or to make really strong assumptions that will hurt you when you get to the questions.
Yeah.
Don't make any assumptions, right? Unless it's obvious, unless it's very clear. I would not try to connect dots too deeply. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So far, all we know from this sentence is that colonization was driven by commerce. Okay.
Yes.
And
All
commerce
right.
means what? Like dealing with
Probably
economy
trade or
stuff,
something.
trade. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, since the Enlightenment, European expansion and commerce have been taken to be two defining characteristics of modernity. Okay, so we're just basically saying that expansion, which sounds kind of like colonization, and commerce, which we had mentioned earlier, are modern. I wouldn't say that that's super critical, at least as far as it seems right now. We're kind of just continuing to draw a connection between colonization and commerce. So I would probably keep reading. Um, we're going to get another person here. So, as Kenneth Andrews observed, quote, European overseas expansion in this epoch was fundamentally a commercial movement. Hey, Jack, that sounds pretty familiar, right?
Right.
Kenneth Andrews is agreeing with us. Nothing super new. But again, tracking the person might be nice. And then we get the but. So, but the pursuit of glory corresponded with a hostility to profit, wealth, and commerce. Okay, so Jack, I'm really glad that you brought this up from sentence one. Like, hey, colonization, that sounds like, the pursuit of glory. Is that fair to say? We wanted to hold off on that like instinct or assumption early. And that I'm glad we did because it sounds like in this sentence, they are not they are not inherently the same, right? Pursuit of
Yeah.
glory corresponds with hostility to commerce and profit and wealth, but commerce is our subject. That's pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like just pursuing, um, in this case, colonization through commerce is necessarily helping glory because in this sentence, it's literally saying, and there's a contrast word, right? It's very profound here. If you see a but, a yet, however, usually what comes after that word is really important to the author. And in this case, it seems like glory is not consistent with commerce, right?
Yeah.
It's hostile to commerce.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I do know what this is saying, and so I will keep track of it for sure.
Yeah. Especially because we've tangled glory, colonization, and commerce quite a bit in these two paragraphs that we've read so far. Colonization allows for glory, according to P1. Colonization and commerce are tied, according to P2, but glory is hostile to commerce. So to me, I'm like, wait, what? What is this tangled web? Again, keep reading. Focus on what's presented, keep reading, see how the ideas play out.
Right. We're not supposed to solve the problem.
Yeah.
We're just observers, right?
Yes.
And so as long as we can observe and understand what's going on, we're going to be okay.
I love that. Yeah, we are observers, right? We're just here to watch and to learn from the author. Okay, one more sentence here in P2. The pursuit of wealth was believed to corrupt the performance of public service. So, this is maybe why glory is hostile to commerce, is you shouldn't be pursuing wealth and commerce. You should be doing glory for its own, in its own right, for the public service of it all. So it's, I guess, just explaining why they are hostile to each other, or why
Right.
specifically glory is hostile to commerce.
Right. Still consistent with this idea, maybe giving us some more info on, how it leads to corruption.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we've got our major ideas from P1 and P2. Let's look at P3 and see if we get clarification. This Enlightenment understanding of empire does not conform to the realities of much of 16th and 17th century colonization. Okay. So there's something that's not conforming to reality. Something about empire and colonization are not in alignment. Okay. When it says this Enlightenment understanding of empire, we're probably talking about what we said in P2, right? So something about commerce and glory, commerce, colonization, and glory. So this isn't realistic with maybe later colonization. Kind of a lot to unpack there. Hopefully, we'll continue to clarify that in the paragraph. Let's see, where is this is a very long sentence. Okay. In a statement typical of his generation, the Chesapeake colonist Alexander Whitaker declared in the opening sentence of Good News from Virginia, quote, "Be bold, my hearers, to contemn riches, and frame yourselves to walk worthy of God, for none other be worthy of God but those that lightly esteem of riches." Again, this is all written in Old English. It's a fun one to read. It sounds, though, like, if we were to pause here, despite the fact that it's written in Old English and is therefore difficult to understand and unpack, it sounds like we're saying, especially in that last part, condemn riches. No one is worthy of God except those that lightly esteem of riches. It sounds like we're saying, hey, stop pursuing wealth. That kind of cheapens things, which is still it's pretty aligned with things that we've talked about. Pretty hard to understand, but again, I think we're still continuing in the same direction.
I think anyone who reads this is starting to panic,
Yeah,
right? Because they're like, I don't understand what's going on. This sentence is really hard. Should I just skip this passage? No, no, don't move on because this is hard for everyone. This is intimidating for anyone who's reading it. This is not something that we're born to understand or even supposed to understand in general because we're not necessarily educated on this topic, right? And so at this point, you have to be confident with what you have found. You found the two ideas in the first paragraph, you found the two ideas in the second paragraph. In this paragraph, we only have one kind of idea of this idea, like the empire doesn't conform to reality. That's really hard to understand. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but I promise you, if you're having trouble reading this and you've read this properly, carefully, everyone is having trouble. So keep going until it clears up. It will clear up at some point, I promise you, right? That is the goal of these passages is to kind of intimidate you, scare you, but then eventually give you the point in a very clear manner. And you just can't give up until you find it. Okay.
that is so inspiring
Yeah.
and very, very good advice. All
Yeah, and
right.
this
So,
sentence, by the way, is really hard to understand. I would
yeah,
just try my best to get it, and I think you got a good idea there, but ultimately, nothing is clear yet.
agreed. Yeah. And we still have one more sentence of Old English as part of this quote. So hopefully it'll be a little easier. It says, "Virtue is the only thing that makes us rich and honorable in the eyes of wise men." Okay, so it's still kind of abstract, but it sounds again like, hey, it's not about how much money you have, it's about who you are. So, yeah, sounds good. Um, sounds like we're questioning the colonization or the commerce idea with colonization. Okay, the charge that such sentiments were a cynical, oh, the charge that such sentiments were a cynical cloak over a voracious designs does not deal with the issue that, as with all ideology, they defined the boundaries of politically acceptable behavior. Okay, I don't know about you, Jack. I feel like I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, it's no longer Old English, but also what?
Yeah, very, very weird and hard to understand. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
we skim it. We try our best to read it. This is where focus, this is where resilience is super important on the MCAT, right? Keep going, stay focused. Don't lose focus. Don't lose sight of what you're supposed to find, which is a clear idea.
Yes. Okay, clearly, ooh, I hope you're going to be clear, author.
Right.
Clearly, commerce did in time become central to English colonization. But again, the problem here is that early English colonization has been understood in terms of what their colonial empire became. All right, you said clearly, and it's maybe a little bit more clear than what came before, but I still feel like they're going to clarify it more. Something about commerce and colonization, these are important, but there's a problem. Something about the understanding of empire is problematic to this relationship between commerce and colonization. Maybe it's more complicated than just commerce and colonization are tied. It's not super tangible yet, but that is at least a little more clear than what we had just come from. All right, then we get a short, sweet sentence. Commerce and colonization have separate histories. Okay, that is much more direct. That I think is more tangible. That makes more sense to me. Commerce and colonization might be related, but they are distinct. They have separate histories. It would be a problem, according to the last sentence, to think that they are just the same thing, or they're like entirely intertwined. They have separate histories. Okay,
Okay.
and then
Yeah, and that's something we can actually grasp. And I love that word, right? It's tangible. I can feel, I can hold it. I can do something with this, right? So in this case, yeah, this is pretty much the only idea I've understood in this paragraph so far.
pretty much, yeah. We've got one last little sentence. It says, commerce is not a metaphysical characteristic of colonization. All right. I feel like that's less tangible than the sentence before, but it sounds like we're going in the same direction. They're separate, right? It's not just one is a characteristic of the other. They're separate. To me, that second to last sentence, commerce and colonization have separate histories. That's what I'm clinging to from this paragraph.
So doesn't that kind of sound like the second paragraph, the paragraph right before it, where
Yeah.
kind of said, glory is hostile to, I mean, it's not the same thing. I just realized something. The first sentence of the second paragraph is not from the author's point of view. It is an historical commonplace that early modern colonization was driven by commerce. I wonder why the author is saying it in such a way, right? It is a historical commonplace.
Yeah.
Seems like the author's distancing him or herself from this idea. And it's clear now that the author actually doesn't agree with this idea.
Yeah.
That in this case, colonization was driven by commerce. It's clearly saying commerce and colonization have separate histories. So they're separate, they're different, they're not necessarily related. Is that where the author is going with this? It's not clear yet, but that's what it seems like as
Yeah.
I'm reading this.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Great insight, especially because we know that in paragraph two, we said that, and then we had the but, and then we didn't directly weaken that idea. We said that glory is hostile to commerce, but we know that pursuit of glory was involved with colonization. Again, it's kind of this tangled web between glory and colonization and commerce, but you're right. We're explaining that colonization was driven by commerce, and then we're kind of weakening it in the rest of P2 and here in P3. Yeah, that's a really interesting insight.
I
And
think the
again,
key is, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
oh, we it just it's fun to see how ideas and understanding develops as you go through a pretty dense passage.
Yeah, I think the key is try to understand how the author feels or believes in whatever is presented because our initial inclination is, oh, if the author said it, they must believe it. That's not the case. The author
Hmm.
may say something to disprove it,
Yeah,
right? And so just because the author says something doesn't mean they agree with it. You have to see how well they support it, how well they bring it up over and over again. And it's obvious, and I think this is what's so confusing for students, is that even though the author brought it up, they actually don't agree with it or they don't side with this idea, right? And that begs the question, why bring it up in the first place? Because the author wants to talk about it and maybe make a bigger point. And the only way they can make that bigger point is by disproving this other point that other people make, right?
yeah,
So, okay,
yeah. It's important that you believe the author when you first hear it, but if they give you suggestions that actually they don't believe it, don't discredit that, right?
right.
Trust what they're saying. If they say it and they never question it and the words seem like their own, okay, great. But
It's just so hard because it's fluid. Reading a
yeah,
CARS passage, it's not like a science passage where everything is pretty factual and they say one thing and it builds on another. Here it's like, okay, wait, you just said something and now you're saying the exact opposite. What am I supposed to believe? Right?
yeah,
And that's normal in a conversation. We're
yeah,
having it's a debate. It's sort of like the authors trying to debate themselves to help you understand their point of view. Right. And
yeah,
so you have to read it in a different way. I think it's just you have to get accustomed to it.
for sure. Yeah, and this is a good passage, crash course in getting accustomed to it for sure.
Right. That's so true.
All right, let's look at our fourth paragraph. It says glory was a central motivation of early modern colonizers. Okay, so now we're back to glory and colonization, right? That was something that we had claimed really first in P1. So glory and colonization are tied. That was a central motivation of early modern colonizers. It feels pretty, I mean, it's very direct, feels reminiscent of P1.
Right.
I'm feeling more comfortable. I'm like, wait a minute, I was back. We're back to the idea I was more comfortable with. Hooray. Let's leave commerce behind. We probably won't, but for now we can. For Italian humanists, and above all in the writings of Niccolo Machiavelli, Francesco Guicciardini, and Giovanni Botero, the concern with glory came to be preeminent. Okay, so when we talk about concern with glory, concern can be a negative thing, or it could be describing like focus, like you're concerned with something, you're focused on something. I'm thinking, I mean, it could go either way, but it feels more like concern in terms of focus. The concern with glory, the focus on glory, or the motivation for glory came to be preeminent. If they start talking about how glory is a problem, we'll change the way we understand that. But it feels like this is in alignment with what we had just read. So I'm going to wait until I get information to the contrary. As it did so, the aim became the grandezza of society or of the city or of its greatness and grandeur. Okay, so now we're talking about glory, about making the city great and grand. The aim became the grandness or the grandeur or the greatness of the city. So we're tying glory to the city itself and its greatness. Okay, that that is a new layer to this argument. We haven't talked much about cities. We're defining that term for you as well in this sentence. So I would track that, especially that name. It seems to be in Italian, but it's in italics. So maybe something that's good to kind of reflect on and see, do we understand what its meaning must be? In hand with the Reformation, the pursuit of greatness provided much of the ideological framework necessary for the transformation of Europe's cities, principalities, multiple kingdoms, and composite monarchies in states. Okay, so we're talking about pursuit of greatness or glory and how this transformed. cities, right? Or in the states, monarchies into states. So the idea of glory helped kind of shape Europe, essentially. It has to do with this idea of the grandezza of of the city, the greatness, the grandeur. Glory has to do with developing Europe's cities and their greatness.
Yeah, so far grandezza means the greatness of a city, and glory kind of helped transform Europe.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, for modern European states to emerge, the supreme authority of each city or principality had to be established such that it had a monopoly over law and coercion. All right, kind of getting a little less clear, but it sounds like we're talking about the supreme authority of each city. We've been very focused on cities and the greatness and the grandeur. Sounds like we're still continuing in that direction. I wouldn't be doubting our most recent idea yet. Okay, the power of medieval sovereigns was checked by both by feudal authority and the church. All right, so we're still talking about Europe's cities, okay, and we're talking about their authority. Okay, checks and balances. Why are we talking about that with glory? 16th century writers on Grandezza provided much of the ideological armory necessary for dismantling medieval political systems. Okay, we talk about ideological armory, dismantling political systems. It to me, it's hard to understand, but it feels familiar enough with glory and the greatness of a city and the development of Europe. The grandezza is the glory or related to the glory. We're dismantling medieval political systems. It's transforming Europe or it's changing these cities. I honestly, that whole second half of paragraph 4 feels like a not a question mark, but like a dot dot dot. Like, okay. Um, I think we're still continuing in the same direction.
Yeah, this paragraph is the paragraph that I think makes this so challenging
Yeah.
because I felt like in the last paragraph we started getting somewhere, right? This idea of commerce and colonization have separate histories. And then we get this paragraph, which seems like, okay, are we going back to colonization and glory? Like, is that like they mentioning glory was the central motivator for early modern colonizers? Like they mention all that, but like, where is this going? Why are they talking about glory in these other ways, right? Like, like what's the point of that? Maybe it's because the author really cares about glory, right? And
Yeah.
you have to step back and ask yourself, why is the author not just what is the author talking about, but why? How does this relate to the entire structure of the passage? And I think if you can't get yourself to that position and you're so lost in what's going on, because it's so distracting, right? You may actually feel flustered and you may not be able to stay focused enough to answer these questions. So I think again, hard passage because it kind of goes off a tangent, but not really. You just have to stay focused when it's hard to read.
Yes. Absolutely. And it seems like we're coming back to glory and colonization. We brought that up first in P1. So if you're feeling like, this is creating some doubt and some frustration and confusion, cling to the things that have been themes, right? At least we're back to something we've talked about before. Um, and hopefully we'll continue with that in our final paragraph. So paragraph 5 says the ideology of Grandezza was inherently expansionist. So grandezza is what we were talking about before, the greatness of a city that had something to do with its glory. And now we're saying this is inherently expansionist. So you want to expand. To me, if I'm trying to think of how that relates to what I've read, expansionist ideology sounds kind of like colonization, but I don't know. I'm not going to I'm not going to make an assumption. It sounds like though we're tying glory and colonization again. If I was going to break it down and try and figure it out, that's probably what I would get. David Armitage has shown that, in quotes, Machiavellian grandezza was employed in England, Scotland, and Ireland for the formation not only of one state, but also to motivate a larger colonial expansion. End quote. That does sound like, okay, the grandeza, which is the greatness and the glory, is motivating colonization. That's something we've said before. We said it in P1, we said it in P4, and here we are saying it again. And we're telling you a person that agrees with it, David Armitage. So I don't know about you, Jack, but I feel like with a passage like this that's so convoluted, I'm feeling a lot more comfortable because it feels like I've gotten closer to my main idea. Is that
Right.
just me?
No, I get it too. I mean, I definitely think the authors really focused on glory and colonization.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. In Armitage's analysis, the glory of cities and the building of empire were more than merely parallel. So glory and colonization or building an empire are more than parallel. They were the product of the same forces. So again, colonization and glory kind of go hand in hand here. This ideological link leads to the question of whether colonial expansion was pre-programmed into European culture at some point in the early modern period. Okay, we see a semicolon. We're talking about colonial expansion being pre-programmed into culture. And then we get a semicolon and then it ends. That is at the beginning of several hundred years of colonial and imperial behavior. I saw that that is, and I'm thinking, wonderful, you're going to summarize it. No, they were just clarifying the early modern period. To me, I feel like this is less clear. It was already pretty clear at the beginning. Colonialism and glory are hand in hand, right? That was one of the motivations. I'm not going to let myself get stuck on this sentence, especially it's the second to last.
Right. We're almost there. And I feel like I finally understand what's going on, right?
Yeah.
After reading this, it's they're just trying to figure out what's the motivation of colonization. Is it commerce? Is it glory? Is it something else? And it's pretty clear it's glory, right? But the reading was difficult because when you're reading it, you're feeling like they're going to talk about glory particularly. And it's not only about glory, it's more about colonization and how colonization is spread, right? But yeah, I'll leave it to that until we finish.
Yeah. Last sentence of the passage says the Spanish conquest of the Americas, for instance, can be understood instead as an extension of the glory of the Reconquista. So there you go. We're talking about conquest and glory again, hand in hand. This is the motivation for colonization. And you're exactly right, Jack. I feel like the first sentence and first paragraph being about the pursuit of glory, we think, oh, okay, we're only going to focus on glory. But then we bring in this warlike disposition and colonization. And then really we're focused on trying to figure out why we colonize.
Right.
And again, a lot of people think, oh, just read the first sentence of every paragraph. The most important idea is in the first sentence of every paragraph, or first sentence of the passage tells you your main idea. It does not. It doesn't always, right? It can, but definitely not in this case. You can't, there are no absolutes in cars. There's no one structure that every car's passage is going to have. You got to stay on your toes. Cars
Right.
passages can take any direction they want and any structure they want because like you said, this is a conversation. You're going to talk with all different types of patients. You're going to interact with all different types of people. Some are more guarded with what they believe, and some will shove it down your throat without you asking. Right?
Right.
It's the same thing. Cars passages will be all over the place. They're very different. You just have to be patient and you have to listen well, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and that last sentence kind of clears it up too. It says the Spanish conquest of the Americas, which is definitely colonization,
Yeah.
right? For instance, can be understood instead as an extension of the glory of the Reconquista. So in this case, glory is tied to colonization, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's defining colonization. It's how we see it. So it's definitely the principal motivator for colonization, and that ends up being the argument, right? It's that glory is the key to colonizing. It's the motivator for colonizing, not commerce, right? Which is Also, I guess part of the main idea, you could say it's not commerce, but when you say glory is a central motivator, or glory is what leads to colonization, you kind of imply that it can't be commerce, right? So it's not necessary to include that in your main idea, but it could clarify.
Yeah. It's like a primary main idea and a secondary, right? Like
Yeah.
if you got a question, which of the following is the main idea of the passage? And it was glory is a central motivation of colonization or commerce is not. It's like, okay, well, those are both in the passage. Those are both relevant. They're both pretty important, but glory is much more central to the passage argument. We talked about it in many more paragraphs. We
Right.
came back to it. We represented it stronger. If you were given which of the following is the main idea, that one would win, right? Like that's your primary main idea. That doesn't mean other ideas can't be important, but if push comes to shove, you should know which idea is the most important to the author. What is their
Yeah.
ultimate perspective?
Yes. And I think that, again, the hardest part about this passage was really how they transitioned us from like glory to other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Glory to colonization to other stuff. So as long as you noticed this theme, and I think Molly, you picked it up in the third paragraph, really. Oh, they're going back to glory. Oh, they're talking about colonization. They're just focused on those two things. Then you'll be okay, right? You don't want to just think, oh, the passage is about colonization. That's not enough. And it's not enough to say, oh, the passage is about glory. You have to connect that the author's trying to convince the reader that glory is the principal motivator for colonization, and it's not commerce or some other thing.
Yeah.
And that again requires a lot of practice, a lot of studying, reviewing, and hopefully these kinds of sessions where we break it down help you do that and encourages you to continue. Because
Yeah.
none of these passages are easy to read, and I promise you, if you keep doing it, you're going to get better at it.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of students are great at getting the subject, but not everyone's great at figuring out what the author is arguing about it, right? So you keep in mind, you want both those things. What's the subject and what is the argument about that subject? Yeah, and again, yeah, we hope that these are helpful for you, especially this passage. I think there's so much that we can unpack and so much that we can learn. This one in particular, we highly recommend you try the questions for it. Okay, this is a hard passage. The questions are going to be a really great opportunity to test your critical thinking with a hard passage. But again, you do have the help of understanding the passage better. Hopefully, now you know the main idea, you know the key changes that were made to the argument throughout the passage in its structure. This is a great chance to get some practice with some tough questions. So we hope that you do. Again, if you're listening on December 10th, you could just go to jackwestin.com. It'll be the daily passage for today for cars. But if you're listening to this later, you could check out the link in the description. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our Cars Reading Skills Workshop, and we hope you join us for the next one. Until then, happy studying and have a wonderful rest of your day.